Stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. I'd be lying if I said I ain't understand, my nigga. Cause who you gon' follow when the leaders all get swallowed? You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. I'd be lying if I said I ain't understand, my nigga. Cause who you gon' follow when the leaders all get swallowed? You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. I'd be lying if I said I ain't understand, my nigga. Cause who you gon' follow when the leaders all get swallowed? You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. I'd be lying if I said I ain't understand, my nigga. Cause who you gon' follow when the leaders all get swallowed? Stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. I'd be lying if I said I ain't understand, my nigga. Cause who you gon' follow when the leaders all get swallowed? You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man till you stop chasing your friends, my nigga. Think for yourself, make your own plans, my nigga. You ain't a man.
Norah Mary Vincent was an American writer. She was a weekly columnist for the Los Angeles Times and a quarterly columnist on politics and culture for the national gay and lesbian news magazine, The Advocate. She was a columnist for The Village Voice and Salon.com. Her writing appeared in the New Republic, the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, and other periodicals. She gained particular attention in 2006 for her book, Self-Made Man, detailing her experiences when she lived as a man for 18 months. The experience led Vincent to have a nervous breakdown, and she fell into a deep depression. Nora was a radical feminist who believed that men had a much easier life than women. She set out to prove that hypothesis by disguising herself as a man for 2 years. In her book about the experience, she explains that she actually learned that men have it harder. In fact, the experience was so bad, she had to stop at 18 months because she was starting to hate women due to how badly the women treated her when they thought she was a man. Vincent also stated that she had gained more sympathy and understanding for men and the male condition. Men are suffering. They have different problems than women have, but they don't have it better. They need our sympathy, they need our love, and they need each other more than anything else. They need to be together. Nora died by assisted suicide at a clinic in Switzerland on July 6, 2022, aged 53. Her death was not reported, however, until August 2022.
Hello, what's good? What's good? Let's get it going. I'm a little bit behind. Sorry, guys. Started the wrong video. I don't know what's up with StreamYard, man. I don't know. Whatever. We'll get it going. I'll give y'all a preview on what we're talking about on Thursday night. Yes, rest in peace, Mr. He said, how you doing? God was good. I seen you call, man. I was laying down. My apologies, bro. I'll give you a call back tomorrow. Mr. He said in the building. Sam Shaw in the building. Busy. What's good, my guy? So Solid, always coming through. Make sure y'all check out his new project coming up. Let's get it going, man. We ain't gonna what I want to say. We're not gonna delay this process anymore. We know what we're here to do tonight. We're on chapter 5, guys, of the book Made Man. I'm a self-made man by Norah Vincent. We're on chapter 5, chapter of life. I'm gonna keep y'all for about an hour. Then I'm gonna let you go. Let's get it. Ginger, chapter 5. My apologies, guys. Chapter 5, life. Ginger or Marianne? Asked Father Sebastian. What? I replied. Ginger or Marianne? He repeated, smiling. You know, from Gilligan's Island. Which one is your ideal woman? The glamour girl or the girl next door? Ginger or Marianne? Ned was sitting with a group of black-robed monks in the rec room of their secluded abbey, enjoying a little relaxation after dinner before the bell rang for vespers. The rec room was the large common room located directly down the hall from the cloister gate, and aside from the monk's private bedroom, it was the only place in the monastery that was off limit to visitors. It was where the monks let their hair down. But only so far. This conversation was an exception. The monks didn't usually talk so openly about women, or at least not in front of visitors. They were monks, after all. Actually, that was the only occasion during my 3-week stay on which any of them evaluated the fairer sex so openly in front of me. What's good, chap? How you doing, bro? Well, wait a second, I said. What if you're looking for something a little deeper and more nuanced? This was a woman's answer, or as close to one as I was going to come with. Or this was a woman's answer, or as close to one as I was going to come with these guys. The real woman's answer is always the professor. Even for Dykes, he was the only palatable choice. But Ned wasn't exactly going to say that in this crowd. Mrs. Howell doesn't count, said Father Sebastian. Oh, come on. Why not? She just doesn't. Well, then, I don't think I can choose on those terms. What about you? Which one would you choose? The builder's table, how you doing? That's AKA the gold professor. How you doing, bro? Miss Mary, how are you, sis? The girl next door. What else did I expect him to say? He was the boy next door, a clean cut, squared off, very nice man. I turned to Father Diego, who was sitting next to Father Sebastian. Okay, what about you? Glamour girl or girl next door? For me, the glamour girl was the girl next door, he said, sighing theatrically, and I still remember her name, Caroline Doffer. This may have been monks living under vows of chastity, but they were still pretty typical guys. And of course, that is exactly why I chose them. Given the alternatives, a monastery was the least terrifying venue I could think of in which to observe men living together in close quarters without women, and the only one I was likely to infiltrate successfully as Ned. The other obvious choices were prison or the military, both of which would have required physical examinations, extensive background checks, and in the former case, the commission of a crime. Besides, I didn't fancy being anally raped and beaten senseless on a daily basis in a men's prison or running myself ragged under a drill sergeant. I mean, you're a woman, you wouldn't have got anally raped. Whatever. I needed to go somewhere where I wouldn't have to disrobe, where I could have mental and physical privacy when I needed it. My sanity and my cover would depend on it. That left religious orders. I considered infiltrating an Orthodox Jewish community, but I knew that it would be virtually impossible for me to pass as a fellow Jew among observant Jews, since I knew very little about their religious practice or cultural traditions. I did, however, know enough about Catholic practice to pass there. I had been raised an observant Catholic and had once taken my religion very seriously. As a child and adolescent, I had been devoted to the masculine intellect tradition of the church and its emphasis on reason in the service of faith. In college, I read selections from the works of Duns Scotus and Aquinas, Anselm, Boethus, Occam, and Augustine, and had taken to heart the writings of Thomas Merton and C.S. Lewis on the subjects of Christian mysticism and theology. This tradition had deep roots in me, though in my conscious mind, I had eschewed it all as nonsense long ago, or thought I had. But once a Catholic, always a Catholic. And well, if you were my kind of Catholic, forget it. Boethius just doesn't let go. So a Catholic monastery seemed like a natural fit. There, I could live, work, and pray among a small group of men who had chosen to spend their lives together, and thereby perhaps find out something about male socialization and interpretation in an all-male environment. Hey, Tay-Tay, how you doing? Make sure y'all check out Tay-Tay, the real queen of MMA and combat talk, here on YouTube, please. Best of all, I thought, I might find the answer to another pressing question that my earlier experience has raised for me. I had been to the sex clubs. I had gotten as close as I could get to the grittiest, barest, and arguably the most all-consuming drive of the male animal. I had seen and experienced some of what it could do to a man. Now, I wanted to go to the other end of the known universe. I wanted to know what happens when you take sex away. I wanted to know what celibacy does to a man. And I thought the answer to the question might be found in a monastery. We're on page 134. All of this is why I did something as crazy as hop a flight to somewhere I couldn't even locate on a map to live among people I didn't know and who didn't know me. And all I could think about was where the hell I was going to hide my tampon applicators when I got my period. But for all my fears, Ned slipped into the place with remarkably little effort. I had exchanged a few letters with the vocation director. We had one long conversation. What? But for all my fears, Ned slipped into the place with remarkably little effort. I had exchanged a few letters with the vocation director. That's an incomplete sentence, sis. We had one long conversation on the phone. I had offered a character reference or two and had expressed my desire to make an extended retreat. They were looking to expand their ranks among younger men who had the talents to offer. They had plenty of space for guests, and they were in pretty constant need of revenue. Retreatants at the monastery were charged a daily fee for room and board, so they seemed happy enough to indulge in my interests, whatever the outcome. For my purposes, the place was perfect. At any given time, there were around 30 monks living in the abbey, give or take those who were away periodically on church business or ministering to the faithful in local parishes. It was a relatively small, manageable group in which to mingle and observe. Mingling and observing meant falling into step with the abbey's strict prayer and work schedule, which took some getting used to. Every day was punctuated by ringing bells. Sadly, these weren't serene pastoral bells tolling gently through the halls and hills. They were electric bells, those shrill, hammering alarm-like mechanisms that once used in public high schools to mark the beginning and end of each period. They were poised at regular intervals on the walls throughout the monastery. One of them was right outside my door. Its ring was so jarring that the first time it woke me up at the brutal hour of 5:30 a.m., I was in the hall before I knew where I was. The first morning prayer, vigils, was at 6 a.m. I usually lasted until 6:30. Then there was breakfast, which was a silent meal, followed by the second morning prayer session, lauds at 7:15, and by 8 o'clock, you were ready to begin the work of the day, which proceeded until the midday prayer at noon. Lunch followed. Lunch was the only informal meal of the day, so conversation was allowed. After lunch, the work of the day resumed until nearly 5 p.m. Daily Mass was at 5, followed by dinner. Dinner was usually a formal silent meal during which one of the monks read aloud. After dinner came a short recreation period, and then the final group prayer of the day, Vespers, at 6:45. All of this was set out in detail in a schedule on the desk in my room, along with a couple of devotional books, a brief history of the monastery, and a set of rules and guidelines for visitors. My room was furnished sparsely, like all the other rooms, with the twin mattress on a metal spring frame, a sink with a mirror, a wooden desk and chair, a bookshelf, a reading chair, and a closet. It was on the fourth floor of the cloister, the floor usually reserved for novices. But there weren't any novices these days, nor had there been for several years. There were a lot of empty rooms on the floor, with rolled mattresses on the cots and nothing but lonely crucifix on the bare walls. Though he wasn't a novice, a monk named Brother Virgil was one of the few other people living on that floor. His room was a couple of doors down from mine, and we shared a bathroom. He was living up there because he had not yet taken his final or solemn vows. He was a special case. He had been a novice at the abbey in his early 20s and had taken his preliminary, also called simple vows, after completing the novitate. But at the end of the normal 3 to 4 year trial period between simple and solemn vows, he had decided to leave the community and make a go of it in the outside world. He had gone back to school and gotten a degree in biology, worked as a lab assistant for a while, and then When the research grants dried up, he ended up selling insurance and cars for a living. He had love affairs, as he told it, gotten his heart soundly broken. He acquired things, stereos, cars, gadget, a 3-bedroom house, you name it. But then in 2001, he decided to come back to the monastery and had taken simple vows for the second time. He was the only monk I met who had left the monastery and come back. And he was one of the very few monks I met who had come to the life as a mature man, having experienced all that the outside world had to offer. Corey Joe, how you doing, bro? Champion Heart, good to see y'all, man. Happy Wednesday, guys. I struck up my first true friendship at the Abbey with Brother Virgil, a relationship that would, in the end, teach me more about the limits of male friendship and the delicate balance of camaraderie and self-reliance that seems to prevail in all male quarters than anything I experienced on a night out with my bowling buddies. Virgil was a delight, a lifetime to me in the beginning. He wasn't one of the brooding introverts I expected to find in the cloister. Quite the opposite. He was a goyish Albert Brooks. He had the same antic face and impish eyes, a closely clipped, silver stubbled head, and an endearing, doughy body with a tumescent paunch under his belt. There was a self-effacing sarcasm and sparkling intelligence in his remarks that made me want guys like him to land in purgatory, just so that doubters like me would have someone to eat lunch with. Of course. Wait, hold up. There was a self-effacing sarcasm and sparkling intelligence in his remarks that made me want guys like him to land in purgatory, just so that doubters like me would have someone to eat lunch with. Okay. Of course, there was a lot more in Virgil than his wit, and as I would soon learn, but at first, this bittersweet clown was a godsend. I want to elaborate. I had a pen right there. This passage right here is crazy. Do you guys know why? I'm going to read it one more time. There was a self-effacing sarcasm and sparkling intelligence in his remarks that made me want guys like him to land in purgatory, just so that doubters like me would have someone to eat lunch with. What does that tell y'all about a person? Have you heard something like that?
Did you hear what I said?
What would that tell you about somebody who said something like that about you? Now, if I may be looking too deep into it, who knows? But to me personally, she's showing an extreme level of selfishness. Right, exactly, BZ. Exactly, bro. Corey, it's deeper than that. The mind of this woman, and again, this is just me. Y'all let me know if I'm off. This is just me. She's so selfish, right? That she'll be staunching her beliefs of a God not. She's so staunch in her beliefs of God not existing, right? But, and however, she'll keep her non-beliefs, right? She'll keep her stance, her stature on that. but wish this man to go to purgatory, which is hell. You guys all know purgatory means hell, right? She wished he'd go to hell just to entertain her. Thank you, Miss Mary. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, sis. Right. And this is a lot of things that we talk about as men, that when we're and maybe we don't express it right, maybe we don't use the correct words, right? Maybe we're too staunch in our stances, right? But when men try to convey this, we're crazy. The truth is, you can do, and this is not just women, this is men too, right? But in the context of what we're doing, we got to stay in the context. She is a woman, born a woman, right? You can be the best person and have the best intentions, right? But they'll still want you to fall. I thought limbo was the place between heaven and hell. Is limbo and purgatory the same thing? We could look it up. I got time tonight. Hold on. If I could type, sheesh. Purgatory, Latin, purgatorium. A common analogy is dross being removed. That don't make no sense. Purgatory, that's what I'm looking for. The intermediate state after death for okay, y'all right. A place of or state of temporary suffering. Okay, good guys. I appreciate y'all. Thanks, guys. So limbo. Right? Right. Right. So shout out to Dusty Jack. Appreciate you, man. Damn shame. Your time's coming. Okay, let's get back to it. But y'all picking up what I'm putting down, right? Where was I at? Of course, there was a lot more to Virgil than his wit. It's crazy how she's talking about the monastery and his name is Virgil. Then his wit, as I would soon learn. But at first, this bittersweet clown was a godsend. I was delightfully surprised. For example, when during mass on my second day, I banged my elbow hard on my armrest mid him, and as I sat there massaging my funny bone in obvious pain, Virgil leaned over and whispered, "Oak is awfully unforgiving, isn't it?" A friendly monk with a sense of humor? Could this be? Virgil knew whereof he joked. Woodwork was one of his trades. He was the resident carpenter for the abbey, and his major task, when he wasn't occupied with more pressing jobs, was to build coffins for the other monks. On my first few days at the monastery, I went out to the shop to assist Virgil. Per his sense of humor, Virgil made the coffins in 3 sizes: tall, short, and fat. The sizes were a smirking nod to some of the monks' nicknames, one of which was Father Richard the Tall. The moniker was used to distinguish him from the other, more poorly, Father Richard in the monastery, who was known as Father Richard the Fat. We found that we had the same sense of humor and love of language. We expressed our political opinions and often agreed. We quoted Monty Python back and forth to each other. He read aloud from his collected works of Gilbert and Sullivan. I read aloud from my collected poems of W.H. Auden. We talked philosophy and theology. I asked him about his vows, looking for and finding thoughtful answers to my questions about monastery life. Virgil was a natural intellect. He didn't appear to be particularly well read outside of his prescribed fields: biology, Catholic theology, and his avocation, musical comedy. But he had an innate gift for logical reasoning and an insatiable curiosity, both of which were contagious. I told him I sang opera arise to the cows in the pastures after supper, and he beamed with amused excitement as he asked, "Oh, you sing?" He had a precise, clear voice and took his singing very seriously in church. Many of the other monks were hard of hearing and turned off their hearing aids during services in order to withstand the blast of the organ. Most of the rest pretty well recrucified the Lord each day in song. Virgil seemed glad to have another appreciative voice to keep him company. He often led us in the invitatory and other hymns and sang the solo parts in the responsible psalms, tuning himself quickly on a pitch pipe that he kept for that purpose in the cubby of his pew. As I was to discover, the obsessive pitch pipe tuning was one of his many anal retentive tics, most of which I found vastly entertaining, especially because they were one of the few things about which he had no sense of humor whatsoever. He liked things just so. Details had to be correct. Mistakes displeased him. He wanted his pitch right and his part sung perfectly. He longed for a Gregorian precision in his brother's singing, and he winced at their sour notes. He ironed and starched his handkerchiefs and tailored his own habits, some of which he made by hand from scratch. This was classic Virgil. He was in control, or liked to think he was. There was an important part of his self-image, indispensable to his sanity and sense of place in the world. He thrived on the predictable rituals of monastery life. He enjoyed order, and he seemed to need it. I became part of that scheme. Virgil used to call me to him in church like a dog. Depending on the day and who did or didn't show up for prayers, I sometimes sit a seat or two away from him in our row. Once the service had started and he'd seen that the seats between us were going to remain empty, without looking up from his hymnal, he motioned me to his side with a curt hand gesture that meant, "Come." And I, like a trained subservient, I did come. I flipped my book open to the right page, and he'd point his index finger, again without looking at me, at the right place in the prayer. This was pro forma. I was the pupil, he the master. And in this respect, our relationship had a satisfying sharpness to it, clean by the numbers. I lost myself a little in this ritual, or Ned did. I can't be sure which or to what extent. I know that Nora flew into her friendship with Virgil, someone who seemed to present a full complement of emotional, intellectual, and spiritual stimulation. And flight is not the wrong word. Women often do fly into new friendships with abandon, touching all the points of contact like bells on a tree. Men don't, especially with other men. And that is where Virgil and I clash, though I say this with the benefit of hindsight. In that moment, I simply enjoyed the care that Virgil took with me in services, even if it was his command and my following, because as much as he did it with his marital effect, he also did it with unfailing kindness and a genuine desire to include me. Y'all know what she's talking about, right? Anyone in the chat? What it sound like? She didn't know it. I'll give y'all a minute, chat. What y'all think? What y'all think? Ebon, what's good, my bro? Nope. Theodore, what's happening, bro? And I ain't forgot about you, Ebo. Just my wife's been sick. We've been going through some stuff. I'm taking care of my wife. My wife been sick. She got that cold, that infection that's been going around. So I'm getting her back on the mend. But I got you, bro. Cooling? Nope. She is, bro. She is. She's on the mend. She was able to work from home today, so. Let me type it in the chat and see if it makes sense to y'all. Hold on. That makes sense, guys? Ladies? He said, I hate hotel Wi-Fi. My man always on the road. I hear you, bro. It sounds like covering to me. Instruction, correction. Man, everything's everything, my bro. We on the mend. Appreciate you checking out for me, man. Appreciate you, bro. That's my brother right there. Right? She's talking about him covering her. Right? Keeping her by him. Right? She didn't even know what it is. Mentoring. Right? Watching out. Looking out. Making sure we good. Appreciate you, Mr. He said. Y'all subscribe to Mr. He said and Ms. C said, promoting conscious parenting here on YouTube. In the moment, listen, guys, listen, and let me know if I'm off. Please let me know if y'all hear something different, right? In the moment, I simply enjoyed the care that Virgil took with me in services, even if it was his command and my following, because as much as he did it with all his martial effort, he also did it with unfailing kindness and a genuine desire to include me. Standing beside him, close enough to smell his breath, which always smelled of Listerine or Altoids, mixing my voice with his, I smiled to myself out of sheer affection. But among men, especially among men who live together under vows of chastity, where the fear of sexual desire is ubiquitous and powerful, and the boundaries of intimately strictly drawn at the barge post distance, girlish crushes and even pseudo-platonic exuberance are definitely not okay. I haven't read this yet, guys. I'm reading it with y'all. You know how some people, y'all can tell how I'm messing up words, right? And I'm stumbling words because I haven't read it before, right? She didn't even, most women don't even understand what it is, but they feel it though. And they long for it. This is a lesbian woman pretending to be a man in a monastery.
Did you hear what I said?
In a monastery talking about a man like this. I'm telling y'all, her OS got broke. Her computer crashed. And it was of her own doing. Y'all see what I'm saying? It was of her own doing. She couldn't blame it. She couldn't blame it on a situation that somebody put her in, right? She couldn't blame it on, oh, this guy convinced me to do blah, blah. She couldn't blame it on nobody, right? Accountability broke her. She knew Hey, Mr. He said, you tell me if I'm wrong. Y'all tell me if I'm wrong, bro. The things that she is saying she experienced, right? The things she's saying that she experienced as a lesbian woman, a feminist lesbian woman were given out freely with no cost. The things women say they don't get. They were given out to her freely without any cost. Listen to what I'm saying, right? The friendships that she had that were solid with people she knew for a matter of weeks were stronger than her. Hey, let's go. Let's go, BZ. Right? The things that women say they cannot receive, that they can't pry out of a man with sex, with emotional connection with children. She went and saw that it is given out freely. It is given out freely amongst men. No charge. All she had to be was what, guys? She didn't even have to submit to she didn't have to submit to them. She was presenting herself as a lesbian. She didn't have to submit to none of them. All she had to do was do what? Be a decent person. What's good, Marcus? All she had to be was a decent person. It didn't cost her nothing. You're falling in love with him, said Father Jerome. Oh, I am not, I said. It's not like that. Page 140. Yes, you are, he said. And it is. Father Jerome spoke with the voice of experience. He claimed he'd seen this many times before. From the moment I met Father Jerome and heard his stereotypically lifting voice, I'd assumed he was gay by orientation, not in practice and out to himself. If not it by dint of the obvious, out of everyone else as well. This was one of the reasons I befriended him. He was 50, but looked 10 years younger. He was a little on the plump side with a rounded, acne-scarred face. He had a blindingly white smile with large, perfect teeth, which he told me he had bleached by the dentist. He was a transfer from a parish somewhere up north, homeless at present, and shacking up at the Abbey, perhaps hoping to stay for the duration if they voted him in after a trial period. He had been there for only a week when I arrived, so he didn't know the place much better than I did. He certainly wasn't an insider. I hopped a ride with him to town on my third day, hoping to be mostly honest about myself with at least one person in the Abbey, someone who I thought might have some perspective on the place. I could let my guard down with him, I thought. He was loose and easy. He had the generic gay sense of humor, catty hilarity. We understood each other in that, so much so that I had felt comfortable enough to mention it. I like you, Father Jerome, I said. Why is that? He asked. Oh, I don't know. You make me laugh. No, be honest, he urged. Why? He was fishing. Oh, I hesitated. I don't think I can be quite that honest, can I? Sure you can. Nothing you could say would bother me. Are you sure? He seemed to know what I was going to say, and was encouraging me to say it. It was the kind of dance I've done with gay people before. You sense you're in the presence of another gay person, but you don't always want to be the first one to say it, in case you're wrong or in case they're not out even to themselves. Hey, Quee, how you doing, Sissy Pooh? Of course, he said. Tell me. Okay, I said, taking the leap. Because you're such a queen. He looked surprised. What's a queen? He said. Oh, come on, I balked. You don't know what a queen is? No. What is it? I was caught here. No escape in sight. Well, I said slowly, an effeminate gay man? I pronounced the words effeminate and gay haltingly, trying to soften the blow. Yes, sir. Not pretending, trying to understand the male perspective. I pronounced the words effeminate and gay haltingly, trying to soften the blow. Could he possibly not know he was gay? Or was it just the terminology he hadn't heard before? So you think I'm effeminate? He squeaked in horror. Yeah, kinda. You mean like in the birdcage? Well, I answered, that was a little exaggerated. I'd say Robin Williams more than Nathan Lane. Lane was a screaming queen. I'd say you're just a queen. Stop saying that, he snapped. I hate that word. I'm sorry, I said. I've insulted you. Forgive I said anything, really. I thought you knew. No, he recovered. You haven't insulted me. There was a heavy silence. Then he blurted suddenly, so you think I'm gay? I know you're gay, I said. Or let's just say I bet the odds on it. But how do you know? Well, I said gingerly, here's another term for you. Gaydar. Have you heard of that? No. Well, it sort of means it takes one to know one. So you're gay. You've been with men. His interest was really piqued now. Yeah, I said, scrambling. I've been with men and women too. More women than men. He leapt on this. He asked me more about it. What it was like. What did I do sexually with men and why? He spouted the usual abomination line from Leviticus and added he thought gay sex was disgusting. He'd been horrified by what he'd seen of it. Yet he was clearly fascinated by it. He researched it thoroughly on the internet, he said, finding the most appalling websites he'd ever watched a few episodes of. Websites, period. My apologies. He'd even watched a few episodes of Showtime's gay dramatic series, Queer as Folk, all purely in rubbernecking horror. You understand? Not out of the prurient interest. I asked him about his sexual history too. He told me that he was a virgin. He entered the religious life at 20 and effectively killed his sexuality there. I didn't know whether to believe that or not, though the few other monks to whom I spoke openly about their sexuality had said something similar. The majority of them had joined that order very young, in their late teens or early 20s. And some, perhaps most, had done so without having had any sexual experience at all. A couple of them, including Father Jerome, spoke of the inevitable wet dreams and involuntary erections that accompany puberty, but they did so sketchily and bemusedly, as of something experienced long, long ago and now barely recalled. One of them said simply, I'm not interested in sex. He looked very uncomfortable when he said it. The very idea of bodies commingling made him squirm in his seat as if it were calling up a bad memory. Virgil, by contrast, had been characteristically funny on the subject, saying, there's suppression and then there's repression. Let's see now. I'm trying to remember which one is the bad one. Oh, yes, repression. That's when you say, I don't have a penis. That don't work. Then there's suppression. which is when you say, down, boy. Then there's suppression, which is when you say, down, boy. Now, everyone had such a clear perspective on the matter, but then, unlike Virgil, many of them hadn't lived much of a separate life outside the cloister. Either way, it must have taken superhuman effort or pathological powers of denial for these men to counteract such a strong biological drive. At least Virgil had had the good sense to see that arriving at a chaste existence in this manner by preemptive force wasn't likely to work. He'd gone out into the world and, as he said, had a really good time. And at the end of it all, when he reached the bottom of the fun, he realized that pure sex wasn't what he wanted. He'd seen that, like the world's counterparts to poverty and obedience, material possessions and limitless freedoms, lust had left him feeling empty and insatiable. Wanting sex wasn't some eschewed evil for him. It was more like a dish once devoured, found wanting and now passed over, not without occasional pangs, but with a kind of earned laxity. Still, Virgil had serious issues with control, and as Ned would learn, that was still part of the sexual and emotional package, and probably always would be, partly because Virgil was just Virgil, but mainly because Virgil had chosen to rejoin a community of men that was all about control, self, and otherwise. That's what chastity and obedience meant in the Abbey. Nobody there was practicing non-attachment. They were doing it the Western way, discipline, stone cold. Father Jerome was a classic example. On our trip to town, I had come around to telling him about my friendship with Virgil. And that's when, like an old pro, he said, "You're falling in love with him." But how did he know? How could he really know if he wasn't recognizing in the feelings he had himself? They said in me. Okay. How could he really know if he wasn't recognizing in me feelings he'd had himself? She's trying to play reflector. I don't know. I'd concede at last. Maybe I am. I honestly didn't know. Feelings got strange in that place, isolated from the neat perspectives of the outside world. I suppose if Ned had really been a boy, any moderately observant person would have been right to assume that he was gay as a parade and have impure thoughts about Brother Virgil. In comportment, I wasn't bothering to be very butch. I was being me, though purposely less demonstrative than I would have been as myself. Still, even toned down as a man, my hallmark female behaviors, my emotive temperament, and even my word choice read as gay, or at the very least odd. Jerome, eager to dispel conjecture about his own sexuality, was quick to jump on these cues and stomp them with all the force of his own self-hatred. Wow. In his presence, I made the mistake once of referring to one of the other monks as cute, the kind of thing that women say all the time about sweet elderly gentlemen like the one to whom I was referring. He was in his 90s and succumbing to Alzheimer's. Every time you saw him, he would put his hand on your arm, smile at you in the most beatific way, and say, "Bless you." I found it very touching, though uninventive. Cute was the word that came to mind over lunch that day, and puppy mush mush the tone that came with it. But as soon as the offending remark was out of my mouth, Father Jerome pounced on it, sneering. "He's not cute. You don't call other men cute." I made similar mistakes in front of the other monks. One night at dinner, I goofed hugely when I told Father Richard, the tall, that he looked very good for his age. He did. I couldn't believe he was 80. As soon as the remark came out my mouth, everyone at the table stopped eating mid-forkful and looked at me as if I had 3 heads. Father Richard, the tall, said a very suspicious squint-eyed "thank you" and looked away, clearly embarrassed. But the implication from the other quarters was clear. What the hell's wrong with you, kid? Don't you know that properly socialized males don't behave that way with each other? Naturally, I didn't. And I was going to get a bigger lesson in that sooner than I knew. I was going to have to learn, as I suspect most boys do by the time they reach puberty, not to be such a Nancy. There was something I had observed. This was something I had observed, though not yet thoroughly experienced. I had seen the same thing happening with Bob's son, Alex, at the bowling alley. By all accounts, Alex was a sissy, a mama's boy who needed toughening up. Everybody kicked him around a bit emotionally for that purpose, pushing him off with a sharp remark when he came to us in tears over losing his ball in the alley, machinery, or getting gypped out of a game by the desk clerk. Don't be such a baby, Bob would say. Jesus, go and get your money back, or do I have to do it for you? In the same spirit, Jim had once had Alex put his hand on the table and hold it there as long as he could while he thwacked his knuckles repeatedly with a plastic ruler. Alex endured it as long as he could, grimacing, but determined not to fail the test. It was all done in jest, and Jim didn't seriously hurt Alex, nor did he intend to. The ruler wasn't that rigid, but the spirit of the thing was there, and the message clear. Thicken your skin, boy. And so it was for Ned, though the process was far less overt. It wasn't just the sexual tension of Ned's presumed gayness and his awkward expressed attachment to Virgil, but his seeming ignorance of masculine boundaries. To some of them, I think it became clear fairly quickly that I was the weak man in the platoon, the guy you have to break in basic before he got to the front lines and put everyone else's life in danger. I didn't understand this dynamic at first. I certainly hadn't expected it, and of all places, a monastery. And of course, it was entirely different than anything you'd find in the military. It wasn't as if the monks burst into my room in the middle of the night, tied me to my bunk, and beat me with bars of soap twisted in pillowcases, or made me do push-ups in mud pits in the pouring rain until I promised not to talk about my feelings. But I got a fairly clear sense by the end of the first week that I was a threat to their fragile ecosystem of terse masculine rapport. Poppy Blanco, what's happening, bro? G5 Gave, the jet is here. What's good, bro? Make sure y'all subscribe to G5 Gave, TWT, if you got time. I wasn't surprised when I got sour looks and disapproving shakes of the head from Father Jerome or from people like Father Cyril. Cyril was the prior of the monastery, which meant, as he lost no time in informing me the first time we met, that he was the second in command after the abbot. At 68, he exuded the jaundiced outlook of an unhappy man who knew there was no remedy for his unmet aspirations. He was too old to change or grow or do the things he left undone, and he took out his insecurities on anybody he thought inferior in intellect or station in himself. If I'd been a serious contender for sports in the novitate, Father Cyril would surely have done his best to snuff my candle. I expected that of him. He didn't want anyone in his chosen small arena coloring outside the lines or challenging his authority. Besides, it was his job to enforce the hierarchy of the abbey, which was its organizing principle. As a newcomer, you either fit or you foundered. You either learned your place or you left. There could be no place for an upstart in a world where obedience was a vow, and learning to be like the others was a mark of fidelity. Jerome had obviously internalized that message long ago and was a knot of denial and mishap as a result. In this place, I could see how a person could be broken down. It began happening to me. And once that was accomplished, once you had accepted the terms of the monastery rule and sufficiently humbled yourself before God and the order, Cyril's ounce of authority, which in the outside world was on par with a manager's power at a McDonald's, would subtly mean a hell of a lot more. In this way, it was no different than the military. Submit, become like the others, a pure, predictable machine, ordered and in hand, and never, ever show weakness or need. But I was used to showing those things. A free woman's privilege. Here we go. I was clueless, young Ned, at the bottom of the heap, seeking instruction, guidance, open arms. I got lost in the politics and the pack mentality of the Abbey, and I was amazed at how quickly it happened. Ned fell right into character. Ned did fall in love a little bit with Brother Virgil right away, just the way novices and postulants do and aren't supposed to. And his crush had to be corrected because that was the obligation of his superiors. Cut it off at first sign. In intimate groups of men, Freudian impulses are expected to arise and with help and guidance resolve themselves. It's part of the process in monasteries too, part of what the novitate is for, getting up all the buried stuff, all the daddy issues, the brother issues, the fag issues, and dispensing with them early, before they become entrenched and before the community has wasted too much time and too many resources on a maladaptive cub. Still, I was pretty sure that what I felt for Virgil wasn't sexual or even romantic, though the twisted mentality of that place, always on the lookout for forbidden desires, had made me wonder. The feelings were very real, whatever their motives, and utterly unexpected. They were what drew me into the emotional vortex of the Abbey in the fullest possible experience of being a young man at expressive loose ends in an all-male environment designed to rid young men of their messes. Let's go. Experiencing this strange and foreign treatment firsthand, I developed new sympathy for boys and young men, and I felt sadness for the damage done to them in those rites of passages we all condone and inflict to make them into men. I remember my brother's plight with this same process, seeing them as young boys weeping at home with my mother, telling her of the petty cruelties perpetrated against them by other boys and men at schools and summer camps. In those days, they were every bit as vulnerable as I was and still able to show it. What's more, they could still ask for and find comfort and sympathy for their pain. But now, like so many other men, if my brothers show emotion at all, they show only anger because that's all they've been allowed. I have not seen them cry for a very long time. Perhaps they can't anymore. I know as much was true, or at least one of the more candid monks who, when I asked him how many times in his life he'd shed tears, said that he could count the number of times on the fingers of one hand. I'm a very rational person, he said ruefully. I'm not given to outbursts. It's part of my Germanic male upbringing. He said he was just beginning the process of unlearning this with his own spiritual advisor, who, significantly enough, was a woman. But it was going slowly, and he had much to overcome. Almost all of the other monks had similar issues, he implied, but most of them weren't even close to addressing them. In such an environment, it should have come as no surprise when my first amicable week with Virgil turned inexplicably sour on a dime. He stopped inviting me to the shop. He began ignoring me at services and emanated an unmistakable hostility when forced into close proximity with me. At lunch, he sat as far away from me as possible, and if we spoke at all in passing, he was curt and superior. It was an unmistakable snubbing that caught me completely off guard and threw Ned into juvenile pangs of self-doubt. You know what's crazy to me, right? instead of, y'all, let me know if y'all hearing this, what she's saying, right? Instead of her chalking these experiences and her feelings up to be a female, right? You see how she tried to associate them with how a male feels about them, how she believes a male will feel about it. Right? Instead of it's like she believes, right, that because they see her as a man, that's how she takes it. Does that make sense? And what she's really doing, right, is projecting her feelings about how she felt about something on she believes how men feel about it. Got a star on my eye. That's a star coming in. Right? Does that make sense? No, the reason why she feels about these things and the way she observes them and feels about them a certain type of way is because she's a woman. Dyke and all, right? Lesbian and all. Right? You interpret them this way because you're a woman. Right? Father Jerome had noticed Virgil's deflections too. But then he was looking for it. Kicks and wounds fit right into his schema. He claimed to know the ways of the monasteries. And that's what I'm saying, champ. Let's go. Let's go. Right? It's a total misrepresentation, if you ask me. Right? It's a total misrepresentation. But hey, I didn't write the book. But then he was looking for it. Kicks and wounds fit right into his schema. He claimed to know the ways of monasteries. He knew, he said, all about crushes and unnatural attachments and the hierarchies of weakness and hurt, betrayal and emotional control that festered under the ritual surface of cloistered life. He's doing you a favor by cutting you off now, he said. But this was said in the context of so many other paranoid ideas and nasty undercurrents that I didn't know whether or not to take him seriously. He sounded deeply stung most of the time, as I'm sure I did. Man, she's deep in femininity right now. Not femininity, but in feminism. He say things like, don't ever trust anyone here. They'll betray you. Believe me. He was already paranoid about the ramifications of our gay conversation. Every time we saw each other, he'd say, you haven't told anyone anything we said the other day, have you? He'd assume an I told you so tone when he raised the subject of Virgil's new and sudden coldness towards me. Boy, he just can't stand to be near you, can he? He said with relish. So I'm not just imagining it, I asked. Nope, he definitely doesn't want anything to do with you. That was a dig. He wasn't just rubbing my face in his predictions. He was also having a go at me for being gay. Ever since the gay chat, he had been sliding jabs into our casual banner, the odd homophobic remark designed to needle me, like quoting a recent newspaper article in which a prominent member of the Catholic leadership had said that marrying a person of the same sex was like marrying your pet. He laughed heartily as he told me about it. I fell on the floor when I read that. It was so funny. You're an idiot, I said, visibly angry, and so is the person who said it. As I turned away, I noticed that Brother Felix, whom I didn't yet know by anything but name, was suppressing a laugh as he got up from his chair 2 seats down from Father Jerome. I had noticed Brother Felix before, but hadn't spoken to him directly. He, like many of the other monks, had glasses, a belly, and a bald spot in the middle of his thinning hair. At 50 years of age, he was one of what I could come to think as the mid-generation or bridge monks. He was significantly older than Brother Virgil, but quite a bit younger than the octogenarian monks like Richard the Tall. He was post-Vatican II, but not so post that he'd entirely escaped the pull of the old ways. Yet he was still young enough to understand and identify with the younger generation. For me, this unique position in the Abbey hierarchy would make him the key to understanding Ned's emotional plight at the Abbey and contextualizing it within the framework of the fraught masculinity at work there. He would prove a far more reliable source than Jerome, though not an entirely contradictory one. But those revelations came much later. At first, I misunderstood Felix utterly. At first, he was just another purveyor and consumer of the usual homophobic jokes that abound in almost all exclusively male environments, the monastery being no exception. We met formally over a game of mahjong in the rec room. I've never played the game before, but on his invitation, I joined a foursome that included him, Virgil, and Jerome. I had a bit of trouble getting my puns and chow straight, and I made a number of mistakes up front. Felix was in a cranky mood that night, and this wasn't the best of circumstances under which to make his acquaintance. As I got to know him better, though, and earned his respect, I found out these moves were fairly rare and usually directed at people he took for fools. I was, in my ignorance of the game, displaying the marks of a fool. I had to be corrected on a number of my moves, and his corrections were startlingly sharp. No, you can't pick up from the discard pile unless you have a pung or a chow to show. Okay, sorry, relax, brother, relax, I said. Please, he added under gritted teeth. And as we played on, I got distracted by the television, which was playing in the black background. Usually at this hour, a gaggle of the older monks gathered round the tube to watch the news. One particular segment on the American obesity epidemic had caught my attention. The camera was focused on a man's enormous wobbling belly as he waddled down the street. I couldn't look away. I was still staring when my turn came up. Hello, said Felix in a crescendo of irritation. It's your turn. Oh, sorry, I said. I was just mesmerized by that man's belly. I beg your pardon, he said. Jerome looked down at his pieces. Virgil burst out laughing. I squirmed immediately, regressing in an instant, trying to cover myself like a teenager caught in a flub. What? I clamored. The guy was enormously fat, that is all. But it didn't matter what I said. I wasn't being entirely honest with them anyway, so I could hardly complain that they were having a little joke at my expense. Besides, these jokes were part of their badinage, and I couldn't blow my cover by deflecting it with a dirtier innuendo as I might have done in the outside world. Essentially, this was harmless boy stuff, being the first. That was good. Where am I being at? Hey, peep game, y'all. Hey. She said, besides, these jokes were part of their badinage, and I couldn't blow my cover by deflecting it with a dirtier innuendo, as I might have done in the outside world. All right, champion heart, be safe, man. Don't worry about it. Essentially, this was harmless boy stuff, being the first to make the fag joke and laugh the loudest, the trope of every male bonding ritual. In this, they were hardly different from my bowling buddies, though naively I had expected them to be. Still, their remarks had a testing edge to them that I had never felt with Jim, Bob's, and Allen's. I sense the way you do when you hear an old married couple sniping at each other, that there was a lot being said without being said. Mingling behavior in the rec room taught me a lot about the monks' ways with each other, their interpersonal skills or lack thereof. Watching and listening for only a short time, I could see how rigid and inept most of them were at relating to each other, and why, by contrast, I stuck out so sorely. By the way, they tripped over each other and backed away. You'd almost have thought they were virtual strangers, not people who've been living together, some of them for as many as 30 or more years. Tuesday nights were supposed to be social nights. The abbot had ruled that on that one night out of the week, the monks would sit in a circle and try to talk to each other. It had to be mandated, or it wouldn't have happened. It was supposed to foster greater closeness or openness among the monks, something that they've been trying to work on for some time at the abbey in various ways. Apparently, they once tried instituting a hugging program. This, too, they had to enforce in a formal way to make it happen at all. Some of the monks, especially the older ones, who had ingrained in them an aversion to any physical contact with other men, just couldn't do it spontaneously. Virgil and Felix had each told me about this incident. It was obviously a big event in the history of the abbey, one that Virgil had scoffed at, but Felix had better understood. Felix had told me about the semi-absurdity of it, how some of the hugs felt natural and others, or almost natural, but hugging some of his fellow monks, he said, was like hugging a board. The exercise hadn't lasted. The discomfort with enforcing affection had been too great, or perhaps, as Virgil seemed to suggest, some monks' repugnance for New Age role-play techniques had swamped the spirit of the thing and sunk it before it took hold. There you go, Vincent, cosplay, role-playing, right? Clearly, each man had his own struggles with intimacy. All of the monks did, and these attempts to address those struggles were always prickly, though necessary in a community where men were trying to live in a spirit of love with each other. From what I could tell, it wasn't just that, as Christians, they felt that they had to express greater affection for each other, or even that, as housemates, they had to learn to mingle rather than simply coexist. It was their needs. It was that their needs, whether they could admit it or not, were poking through the formal web of this living arrangement. Their needs for affection and touch and companionship and compassion were making themselves felt. For some of them, it was only in the harrowing run-up to death. For others, it was in the troll of late middle age, and for some, it was happening out of sheer constitutional sensitivity, refusing at long last to be put down. But they were socialized men, and they didn't know how to talk to each other about much of anything at all, let alone their feelings. And who could blame them? That in our culture has traditionally been the feminine role, and it has not yet been entirely bred out of us. Women are still often the communicators, the interlocutors between men and themselves, men and their children, and even men and each other. Observing the monks, I couldn't help thinking that without the connective tissue, without the feminizing influence, these guys were like bumper cars trying to merge. Those Tuesday night gatherings were painful to watch. We'd all sit around in our chairs in a circle. There would be long silences and then little pathetic attempts to fill the silences with talk that sputtered and rarely flew. Then someone would pick up a magazine and start leafing through it. Someone else would pick up the Abbey's copy of the Book of Calvin and Hobbes and do the same. I and one or two of the monks would gravitate to the New York Times Sunday crossword omnibus that was usually lying open on one of the tables. Eventually, people would peel off and leave the room or stand by the door to the patio and pretend to be fascinated by the impending weather pattern shaping up outside the window. Finally, the abbot would give up or the bell would ring for Vesper. Father Richard the Fat was the monk with whom I most often did the crossword. He was the novice master, which meant that, like Virgil and me, he resided on the mostly empty fourth floor. True to his nickname, he was indeed round, Santa-like with a white beard and mustache and a jolly, breathy laugh that would crinkle his nose and show his gums and baby corn teeth. He always had a generous spray of dandruff on the front of his habit. It made me think especially of a crack Jim had once made about a fellow bowler. He doesn't he doesn't need head or shoulders. He need neck and chest. Exactly, Vincent. Exactly. Exactly. Do you think if monks wanted hugs, you think they'd go to a monastery?
Did you hear what I said?
If they wanted affection, would they go to a monastery, or would they have already convinced themselves that, hey, this stuff is not happening, this is not the things I want, or even if I do want them, they're past me? That's why you're in a monastery, to give up those earthly things, right? What do we know? With Father Fat, doing the crossroads was a form of intimacy and a lesson in intellectual humility. It was a way into his mind, which was where he lived. I found it very fulfilling sitting next to him, both of us leaning over the puzzle, laughing about the things we've gotten right or wrong, or the two coy clues and their esoteric answers. With him, that was a brave start for anyone, and I considered it a victory. After all, it wasn't as if you were going to walk up to him, put your arm around him, and say, "So, Father, tell me about your childhood." His interpersonal style was very subtle and hands off. Virgil had a lot of affection and respect for Father Fat. He told me once, in his usual tone of sardonic remove, that Father Fat dealt with the novices the way he dealt with his plants, of which he had dozens all over the fourth floor. The plants were tangled, untamed, prehensile-looking creatures that you felt sure were going to reach out and grab you as you passed. There wasn't a single flower among them. They were manly plants, all sturdy, rubbery greens that even a black thumb would have been pressed to kill. We're on page 155. How many pages we got in this chapter? It's a pretty long chapter, y'all. Yeah, it's a pretty long chapter. So we got a while in this chapter, guys. We're on page 155. We'll be back on this next Wednesday. Yeah. This goes here. This goes back here. Let's see. What do we got? What do we got? Tomorrow's show. Make sure y'all check in tomorrow. What time I'm? Because I got to redo it because I started the wrong one. So, Jay, what's good, Jay? Tomorrow's show.
Okay, I found this on the web for What's Good Day Tomorrow show. Check it out.
Hey, Siri, chill out. Tomorrow's show, guys. Is Satan a woman? When you listen to biblical texts, biblical lore, Satan, aka Lucifer, aka the morning star, is always presented as a male, or at least with the he precept. Why? Do you guys believe that? Tomorrow, what we're going to do, we're going to examine the tendencies, right? The actions and the things that were historically reported, or the stories that we were taught in biblical texts. The representation of Satan. And what we're going to do is compare that nature with the nature of the woman. And let's see if the message behind Satan is of the feminine nature or the male nature. If Satan represents the angst of men or the nature of the female. Shout out to y'all. Subscribe to the channel. If you believe this would be interesting to anybody, make sure you shoot them this way. Have them subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, we will be answering the question or asking the question. I know it's tough. Trigger warnings, guys. Is Satan a woman? Let's talk about it tomorrow. We are out here. Y'all have a great night. Be safe out there. To everybody that watch, I appreciate y'all. For everybody rocking with me, I love y'all, man. Y'all have a great night. I'll see y'all tomorrow. We gone.